Hi everyone, my name is Becca Russell, and I'm sharing my project with you, Church Leaders' Experiences with Kinship, Foster, and Adoptive Families. So the purpose of the study was to understand and explore the experiences of church leaders who were providing pastoral care for kinship, foster, and adoptive families. The emphasis of the study was definitely on pastoral care and also on kinship, foster, and adoptive families, specifically those providing family counseling. To get started, I'd like to define what I mean by kinship care, foster care, and adoption for you. So, kinship care is when children live with relatives. Foster care is a temporary court monitored service to promote safety, permanency, and the well being of children and youth. And then adoption is an opportunity to connect children with permanent families and maintain connection to their birth family, their culture, and their community. So, hopefully, as I've explained those are definitions that you can keep in mind throughout the rest of the presentation. So for the research problem, I chose research problem number 4, which emphasized working with ministers and pastors. I made it a little bit more specific and clarified it to be church leaders who had at least 1 year of experience providing individual or group meetings at least one time a month and providing support to kinship, foster, and adoptive families. So again, wanting to explore and understand their experiences. And then I use the definition of pastoral care provided by Diana Garland, which is generally defined as premarital preparation, educational programs, and family counseling. So a lot of the emphasis was on the family counseling end of this. So I had 2 research questions. The first one was, how do church leaders describe their experiences with providing pastoral care, specifically family counseling, to kinship, foster, and adoptive families? And then my second research question was, how do church leaders understand the spiritual needs of kinship, foster, and adoptive families? And I got some good feedback on both of those. So as far as methodology, if you remember hearing about exploring and understanding experiences, you probably picked up on the clue that I had used a qualitative case study. So for my project, I used interviews and document collection as my 2 ways of collecting data. And I used a semi-structured interview protocol. You can see my interview questions, my interview protocol right there on the top. I had 8 questions. I also used some researcher created pre and post reflective journal prompts. So my pre-reflective journal prompt is there on the left, and then my post-reflective journal prompt is there on the right. The pre-reflection was really intended to be brainstorming, to have the participant thinking about experiences that they've had with kinship, foster, and adoptive families throughout the lifespan of their ministry. And then the post-interview was really to prompt action, next steps, things that church leaders can do in their congregation. As far as participants, the recruitment was a convenience sample, or I'm sorry, purposeful sampling, and then a convenience sample. So I use my personal network of acquaintances, friends, colleagues, people that I know through the foster and adoption community, and was able to convince 4 of them to participate. So I'm going to refer to the 4 participants by their first initial of their pseudonym that I gave them in the project. So I'm going to talk about N, C, E, and J. To give you a little bit of background on those 4 participants, N is a pastor of a medium-sized church in a rural part of Ohio, and he transitioned from youth pastor to lead pastor. He is the only participant who is not a foster or adoptive parent. C is the director of engagement at a local faith-based nonprofit agency, and she is a foster adoptive parent. E is the family advocacy and church engagement director at a local faith-based nonprofit, and she is a foster and adoptive parent. And then Jay is also a pastor of a small suburban church, and he is also a foster and adoptive parent. So I already knew about the participants' roles as church leaders. I was able to clarify that with them prior to getting them to commit to the study, that they met the qualifications, that they had at least 1 year of supporting kinship, foster, and adoptive families, that they were providing individual or group meetings for those families at least one time per month. And they all said yes. So at that point in time, I was able to get an interview scheduled on the calendar. And once I had that, I set out the informed consent form that we all used to learn how to use this semester. And I also sent the pre-interview reflection journal. So I tried really hard to remember at least the day before, if not the morning of the interview, to confirm that I had received the informed consent, that everything was signed, that the pre-interview question was completed, and make sure that we were ready to go for the interview. All the interviews were completed on Zoom for the convenience of the participants and also for me as the researcher. And I used the transcription service or transcription app Rev. As far as member checking and the post-interview reflection journal, once I had the verbatim transcription finished, my goal was to get it to the participants within 5 days of the conclusion of the interview. That was a really hard deadline for me to meet. I'm going to extend that for the future. And so I tried really hard to do that. As soon as I got the verbatim transcript, I asked the participant to provide feedback on that verbatim transcript and also to provide the post-interview reflection journal with their feedback. So I had a lot of triangulation, a lot of different ways of collecting data, and that kind of helped confirm and provide some validity to the results. Data analysis wise, I use a program called MaxQDA, and it helped me to search for themes and create a qualitative codebook. As you can see, I have my codebook there on the right, a screenshot of it, and you can see some of the highest hits in the transcript, hard being the highest. And so I had 4 themes emerge from my analysis. So the first theme was just the acknowledgement of the struggle or the acknowledgement of foster adoption and kinship care being difficult or hard. This was acknowledged by all participants, and again, with 75% of the participants being foster parents and having adopted children from foster care, in addition to being church leaders, we had some of that firsthand subject matter expert to weigh in on that. So that was helpful. Theme number 2 that emerged was the importance of relationships, and this was also acknowledged by all participants, but in different capacities. So the 2 pastors both talked about this question in response to how it translated to pastoral care, and the other 2 participants talked about this in terms of relationship, in the context of relationships in the church and in the wider kinship foster care and adoption community. So a quick quote from the importance of relationships that I thought was really good. It also leads a peer support kinship foster and adoptive family support group with her husband. And her quote was, because I think like the friendships there and the built trust over time and being vulnerable in a reciprocal way, I think that really builds a relationship where it allows the person to kind of let you in. Definitely fit with that context of wider community. A third theme was just the acknowledgement of the need for resilience, acknowledged by 75% of the participants, 3 out of 4, and half of them citing it as a spiritual need. And described this as needing family unity, which I thought was a great way to describe it. And he said, I think that resilience is a huge need, the resilience that is necessary for families that go through those sort of things. So that was really insightful from my perspective. Finally, the 4th theme that emerged, I'm calling action at minimum. And I am totally stealing that phrase from my participant, Jay, who used that as a way to describe what this next step would be. So this theme actually emerged in the document collection of the post-interview reflection journal, which again, the intention was to kind of be some sort of action step. Many of the participants cited the interview as the catalyst for action. But in addition to that, just some of the ideas that they shared as action at minimum. They talked about just asking if there's needs in kinship foster and adoptive families, offering respite nights, having social and training events for that belonging and community piece, providing spiritual support, trauma training your kids ministry leaders at your church, being pro-life and not just pro-birth, so supporting the foster families in the church, and amplifying the voices of those who are actively doing foster care. Jay's quote was something along the lines of, at minimum, we should do a one-off service project. And he also believed that the best place to start was with making sure that kinship foster and adoptive families felt known, seen, and understood. So again, like hitting on that belonging, need for community piece. So in conclusion, a lot of the participants didn't really feel that they were offering support to kinship, foster, and adoptive families, at least not pastoral support. They felt like that definition was too formal for the types of support that they're providing or the types of counseling that they're providing. And they did seem to really understand the spiritual needs of kinship, foster, and adoptive families. Really, those needs for belonging, for community, for action, for support. They often were also integrating their Christian faith in terms using using terms like redemption and sanctification into their discussion of the needs of their foster, kinship, and adoptive families. As far as understanding experiences for the first research question, they all acknowledged that kinship care, foster care, adoption is difficult. It's hard. It requires a lot of good relationships and a lot of resilience. So there were a lot of common themes that overlapped. Those are my references. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and I look forward to listening to and watching yours. Take care.